Welcome back. We are in the final 8 hours of our Microsoft Build Digital 2020 48-hour live stream. And over the last 40 hours, we've seen a lot, and we've still got even more yet to come. And to help usher us into our final hours, or like the Europe song, the final countdown, please welcome Amy and Dean from the UK.
Hi.
Thanks, Christina. There have been a number of key announcements made, as well as insights into cutting-edge tech. We've seen so much through the last 40 or so hours that it's been so far.
Here to help us sift through the bevy of news around the industry juggernauts, we actually have Bola Roteby, Research Director for Software Development at CCS Insight. And also we're joined by Neil Ward-Dutton, who's Vice President of European AI and Automation Practices at IDC. So welcome to Build Digital. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, guys.
I'm not sure. I hope, were you referring to me as an industry juggernaut? I'm not sure about that.
Oh, yeah, both of you. We're really happy to have you here, and we're super excited to just start speaking about everything that's happened in the last few days, but also I know you guys have amazing insight into the industry. So kind of bringing all of our developers, our technical audience back to kind of, okay, like how do we apply this?
Exactly. And Bola, I guess let's kick this off and start with you. We've had 40 hours of content. We've had all the key segments and major announcements have now happened. So I'd love to get your take on what's really caught your attention in the last 40 hours or so.
Oh gosh, where do I start? I was going to say 40 hours later. It's been, to be honest with you, it's been amazing. It's been really interesting seeing some of the work that has been done by the Microsoft team. One of the things that really caught my eye, or there was a number of things that caught my eye, but I like to think about the themes actually, because one of the things that was really important was the focus on developer velocity and productivity. And I think over the last 48 hours, a lot of the announcements and the new features and tools really kind of had that running all the way through the core, which I think that's really important, but it really speaks to Microsoft's heritage in the developer community. But okay, some of the ones that I really loved, and I think I like them because they speak to a lot of the challenges that are within organizations and what developers are finding that they need to do. So, for instance, Visual Studio Code Space. Oh, I absolutely really thought that was a really important feature coming from Microsoft, because the ability to kind of get up and running really, really fast, and also having this consistency of development environment. I think that is something that we see constantly people talk about as, how I set up my environment. It's ages to kind of like get all the pieces. So the ability to have some sort of consistency, get people up and running, to have code spaces in the browser so you can do it on the go, I think I think a lot of people, both at the individual levels, the hobbyist, but also at the kind of enterprise level, will find that really valuable. Live share, anything about bringing people together, collaboration. I love the audio bit. That's really good. The Power Platform is my background is coding, so I've always been the kind of the Visual Studio heart at coding, and I've a little bit sort of Power Platform, but I have to say that's been some really fantastic features there in terms of sort of bringing in a broader scope of developers, so from the people with domain experience and task oriented right through to those who are able to, sort of code like myself in the past, but actually really ramping up our productivity. But the thing I think I really like above all is actually the way everything's integrated, the whole kind of notion, your tool, your choice across every platform. So I think those are kind of things. IntelliCode, and I don't want to steal Neil's thunder because he's going to talk about the AI side, but actually, I think really when you start to see how AI helps people in their everyday work, that is the kind of features that I think, really kind of double down on the kind of analytical capability, the AI capabilities available to developers. I could go on. I could talk about Azure services, sort of Azure DevOps, Azure Static Apps, the whole integration between GitHub. But, I'd be here for the whole half hour. So I think
that's fantastic.
Both spaces and the collaboration, capabilities, live share, and the Power Platform were really key for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think Code Spaces is something that I've been playing around with for a little while now, and it's great. I move between machines quite a lot. Sometimes I'm not in my office. I'm in the house, and I try to leave my laptop in my office and come back to the house when to shut down at the end of the day. But occasionally, when I do need to jump on and do something, I've just hopped onto my Mac that's in the house and just jumped onto my Code Spaces there, and I've got that same environment. It's something that I really enjoy it, and the Power Platform thing is also really interesting that you mentioned that. I myself, as an engineer, naturally would pull up a text editor and start writing some code, right? But funny enough, Amy and I worked on a project last year, and it's great that we're in the UK audience because people in the UK will relate to this. And Amy's laughing, I can see. We did some analysis, or Amy did some analysis on Love Island, the higher class UK TV show. Which is a guilty pleasure of both of ours. And we were was to analyze some of the data from Twitter and see what the sentiment was. And naturally, I thought I'll write this all in Python or something like that, which I started to do. And I ended up just using Logic Apps, which is similar to Flow in the Power Platform, to just build a graphical flow to pull this data from Twitter, analyze it, and put it into a data store so that Amy could do her magic. So yeah, I think even pro developers potentially can change their mindset a little bit and leverage these tools where it makes sense to make their life a bit easier.
Absolutely. I think the thing is the whole democratization of the developer community, because I mean the reality is that people, we do need sort of more developers. This isn't just going to be for the skilled professionals, but I think this, all of those kind of things, especially when we talk about the Power Platform, I think that is really going to kind of, make ways for a lot of organizations and a lot of individuals as well.
So speaking of devs and AI working together, as me and Dean did for our Love Island project, Neil, let's go over to you. I know you're very, very much an expert in the space of AI and automation. What has been exciting around Build for you?
First of all, I have to say I'm really sad. I'm kind of out of this conversation. I never watched Love Island. Sorry.
Oh no.
What can I say?
You can catch up on ITV Player, Neil, if you wish.
Other players are available. Anyway, so for me, the things that really stood out were all the announcements around responsible ML and sort of explainable AI. Those announcements. What we know is that the issue of AI implementation and the challenges and risks that are involved in AI implementation around fairness, bias detection, transparency, explainability. Those are becoming really, really important issues. So it's fantastic to see Microsoft really pushing forward and taking the lead in a number of these areas. These are, if you think about how organizations get started, if they want to actually custom build some kind of AI capability to drive something unique for their business, there's a whole series of stages that are involved, all the way from first gathering your data, cleaning it, making it suitable for actually driving some training, selecting a model, and so on and so on. And at every stage of that journey, if you like, or that process, there's risks. There's risks that if you're not careful, you don't manage them effectively, you're going to end up with a capability that has unintended consequences and really can cause you really big business issues, really big potential financial risks, and other kind of regulatory risks potentially. So it's super important that vendors like Microsoft actually lead the industry in this area, because you guys with Azure machine learning, this is like one of the huge centers of gravity in the industry actually for AI innovation and AI deployment. And it's absolutely vital that you have all of the tools, capabilities, and the whole lifecycle management side of this nailed down. Because what we're seeing is in Europe, we're now moving from that stage of kind of early experimentation and deep pockets of investment in AI to much more of a kind of mainstream adoption phase. That's just starting. And as we get into that mainstream adoption phase, tools and practices and frameworks that can really help organizations get to grips with these really, really important risk management issues. They're just absolutely crucial. So that was the stuff that really, maybe not quite as sexy as Code Spaces or indeed the Power Platform, but it's kind of like eating your vegetables, right? A lot of people don't necessarily want to eat veg, but it's important to keep you healthy. So for me, that was the stuff that really made me excited.
I was going to say, Neil, I somewhat disagree. That was what my personal excitement was, responsible ML. Love that you've said in the industry. I think we are, like you said, starting to see that change of things that are proof of concepts and actually now moving them into production. You spoke a little bit about that change in tooling and kind of how that works. And I guess that's kind of a nice one into thinking about, well, when people are adopting these technologies, you kind of explain the two spectrums, that leveraging AI and maybe being a developer, not needing to know about it, and then kind of the deep integration into custom models. Are you seeing a different spectrum in that space? Are you seeing people lean towards one or the other?
Wow. So a bit like I'm echoing Bola's comments here. I could talk all day about this. If we look at where the market is right now, actually, it's a really odd kind of patchwork, and I think that's a feature of the term AI and what actually goes into that. Because actually, AI, as you will know, Amy, AI is actually many things. There's lots of different tools and techniques, lots of different use cases, and so when you look into what's really happening in the market and how far we've got, it's a super detailed patchwork. Actually, when we look with our research across Europe, we look at adoption of AI. It's clear that in financial services and telcos and in media, actually adoption is pretty deep across companies, right? So around about 45% of companies in Europe in those industries are already using AI. But when you look at where they're using it, actually, it's not terribly broad. So you tend to find really, really big sort of use cases around fraud detection, for example, in manufacturing around predictive maintenance. There's these kind of clusters of really deep expertise and quite mature levels of practice. But they're kind of like little islands, if you like, where there's super deep expertise, deep skills, lots of investment going in. And then more broadly, that's where we're just starting to see the emergence of organizations thinking, well, apart from, let's say, our predictive maintenance solution, or maybe our customer insights area, or maybe our fraud detection work in our financial services business, how can we find advantages from AI investment more broadly? And that's where you get to a much lower level of maturity, and people still just trying to figure out what on earth they can do with this stuff. I know I didn't directly answer your question, but I wanted to make it clear that actually, when you look across the kind of broad industry landscape in Europe, it's a super weird patchwork in a way. You've got these super deep pockets of expertise and investment, and then across the top, you've got a very thin veneer, actually, of people still just exploring.
No, that's great. I mean, that's the way technology progresses in some senses, isn't it? You'll always have the early adopters, the people with really deep skills, and then as technology gets sort of more democratized, then more and more people start to use it, and hopefully they can share their learnings in that space. So responsible ML will be an exciting one for people to start looking at, especially those who are putting it into production.
Absolutely. And in those custom, like you said, Amy, in those custom model kind of creation areas where we're seeing organizations look to, how can we use AI to really differentiate our business? That's where those kind of custom model building and operationalization pieces come in. And that's where the responsible ML becomes really, really high priority. There's many applications of AI in organizations that actually are almost universal, but we don't even necessarily spot them. Sometimes we don't even use them. So I know, for example, in our organization, we use Microsoft 365. We use Delve. We use the Office Insights pieces. They're there. We don't even necessarily know they're there, and we don't necessarily know what's going on or how it's happening, but they're there kind of making little incremental improvements to our environment. So, in those areas, it's Microsoft's job to really think about the bias detection, the making sure that they're only using the data they should use, making sure that they're not using any personally identifiable information. But in other areas, particularly in those areas where organizations want to really drive differentiation deeply through AI, build it into products and services and customer experiences, that's where it becomes their responsibility to do it.
Love that. And Bola, the developer landscape is one that's probably a little more widely adopted, we can obviously say. So where do you really see the developer industry today, and what are the kind of common trends that you see kind of going forward there?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, we've talked a little about it already, especially when we talk about the broadening of that developer community, from the professional developers, with the sort of deep level skills, computer science and engineering background, right through to bringing in, sort of people who have domain experience into that fold. So I think one of the things is how do a lot of the times we talk about skills. And we talk about the skills shortage. And I think one of the things that is really focused on everybody's mind is how do we get more people with the right level of skills and capabilities to actually develop and build the applications that they're looking to build for the next generation, and bring some of the things where you can use, sort of AI or, sort of some of the other capabilities. And I think the focus then is, how do we bring in that community? So I think some of the things where what Microsoft has done with the Power Platform and the whole low code, no code, is to kind of appeal to those people who are more task oriented, who have business domain capability. But then there's also the worry within sort of developers, well, hold on just a minute, are we letting them loose? And, there is we talk about resiliency, especially, given the situation the world is finding itself, is that, how do we ensure that we've got robust systems and things don't fall over? So I think you need to have that whole mix and match environment. So I think that is one of the things that organizations are looking to, but also developers are wanting to make sure that actually there isn't one tool for for the professional developers and then another tool for that they don't integrate and interoperate. So I think this is one of the things where Microsoft is really kind of trying to push sort of the boundaries and showing over the last 48 hours, but also the last months, as the integration between sort of allowing that skilled developers to work in their environment, and going into sort of allowing people who are less sort of skilled in the no code, low code environment, that mix and match environment. So I think that's going to be really key. The other thing is, and I think Neil has talked a lot about this in terms of, the kind of applications we build. How do we bring some of these new technologies in? So like AI, how do we utilize AI in our applications, both in terms of how do we utilize it in the way that we work, and how do we think about the kind of applications that we build that look at, more smarts? And what are the things that we should be thinking about? Is it, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So there's this focus on kind of responsibility, sort of ethical decisions, having the right sort of mindset to think about what applications and thinking broadly. So I think developers have actually got to raise, their game from just pure at the coding level, but to think much more strategically and broader and bigger. And the developer community is showing that they are. You could just see the breadth of applications that have been built, but also the kind of reactions you've seen to what people have been able to quickly build in this, in the environment we find ourselves. A lot of the companies find themselves. So I think that's one of the things. I think, we talk a lot about T-shaped capabilities or T-shaped, sort of environments. Skill sets and people. And I think the thing is, whilst we have to think about that culturally and in ourselves, we still need those, tool sets that help us to do the right thing. So I think that is one of the things that developers will want to, they want to go fast. They want, the speed of change. Everyone talks about, the pace of change, but they also want to make sure that they're delivering quality code. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on developers to almost be this kind of how would I say it, multifaceted Swiss Army knife kind of like, person that has got to think both at the business level, but also at the kind of like the technology code level. And so the headspace is going to be quite focused a lot. Actually, what am I going to build for the company? What am I going to build for, to kind of progress and help my organization grow or help my business grow? So I need to be thinking at that high level. So I think what they're going to be looking at is what tools have I got that help me do that, but give me the breadth and scope to kind of evolve and adapt as and when I need to, but also give me the ability to kind of go down deeper if I need to. And I think that is going to be really key. They're going to look for the tools to kind of support them. But at the same time, I think it's actually quite, I don't want to be doom and gloom or anything like that. I don't think I have. But I think it's actually really, thing that everything's a lot better. The tools are better, They've actually got quite an arsenal, of capabilities to hand. And so I think that, there's going to be a real pressure on developers to be very cognizant of what they can do and where they can get support. One of the things I didn't talk about, which I think is actually really important to say, is around what Microsoft has done with Microsoft Learning. I mean, I always feel as an analyst, because we talk to a lot of end user organizations, I'm constantly learning. I just feel like I've never left university or school. I don't know how you guys feel, but there's so much technology out there, but it's always learning about new things. And so I think I want, to be able to kind of learn in the way that makes sense for me, but at the same time have that rich environment to learn, sort of get access to some of the new things, be able to try and test things. And I think that is something that developers, they've always been good at learning. In fact, I would actually say that, developers are quite, polymaths. They look at lots of different things, and that's brilliant. But at the same time, I think there needs to be some means of sharing that knowledge. So I think, this is one of the things, going back to some of the things I was saying about IntelliCode. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on developers to rise to the game. To rise to the, sort of almost be the heroes of the hour, build things and, do lots and lots of, new technologies, new functions. But they also have to recognize that they are not the only ones in that tasked with delivering. They have a whole team around them, both in the operations level, but also in other departments, security, architecture. So I think this is one of the things, is that collaboration, being able to share and expose, what they're doing, I think is going to be really key. So I think it's going to be an exciting time for developers, but I've always thought it was an exciting time for developers. But they've got they've got a lot of solutions there.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time. And if you're watching this and thinking that, developers, let us know in the chat. Are you ready to step up to this new challenge? I think I agree with Bola. We, as engineers, we need to become more aware. And also it's great, isn't it? We're paid to learn, basically. There's no better job. I think in the technology industry, you have to be a lifelong learner, which is fantastic.
So speaking of lifelong learners, Neil, I'm going to turn this on to you. So being in the data science space, I felt recently I cannot learn quick enough. The amount of different frameworks and new tooling, and then even thinking about that expansion into the other areas that link to ML. So even ML ops now, and containers and security and stuff like that. Can you give us a bit of your perspective on kind of where the tooling's going and how people in this space are looking at that?
Yeah. Okay. Great. So actually, Bola has kind of touched on a lot of the issues already, but from a different perspective, which is kind of interesting. So if you think about what Bola's just been telling us about how developers need to kind of stay focused on their core skills, but also kind of start to look outside, start to look at how they can bring new things in and how they can think more about business problems. Actually, data scientists need to kind of go through a similar transformation. I talked a bit about how we're seeing the market shift now from these very deep pockets of leading expertise focused on very specific problems to a much broader kind of market opportunity. But what we're seeing is for the data science community is that they actually also need to go through a kind of transformation to make that happen. Because if you think about what's really happened to data science and ML, it's now moving from a few years ago, something that very specialized people did kind of in a silo, in a room by themselves, building models, testing models, playing with models. We know from many of our interviews that going back a few years, people would have big data science teams, big banks, for example, and like only a tenth of the stuff that those data scientists did would ever actually get used. So we got to this point where actually for a lot of these use cases that we're now looking at to become reality, the practice of data science has to become kind of integrated right into the way we run business day to day. So rather than having kind of data science over here and business operations over here, they have to come together. And that means that the data science community and the tools they use have to become really closely integrated into kind of DevOps style processes where we're thinking end to end about the full life cycle of what's needed. So we're talking about model versioning, model drift, which is fundamentally about making sure that you really thought about the whole life cycle of how you manage models in production, and that you're keeping them on track, you're keeping them fresh with the most up-to-date training data. So there is a huge shift happening around operationalization of models, lifecycle management, governance, those kinds of things. And the truth is, we can load all that on data scientists. We can. But you know what? It's going to make massive problems for the industry if we do that. Because think about what it means for a regular organization. If you're saying that the only way to really get value out of this stuff is to take an already rare breed, an already expensive breed, and then load more and more skills requirements on them, what's that going to do to the supply of skills to the industry? It's going to break it, right? Because we're already asking for unicorns. Now we're asking for unicorns with 3 horns, fundamentally, or unicorns with wings or golden hooves, right? No, not many organizations can afford that. So we are absolutely going to see a very strong direction in the tooling around, as Bola said again, democratization. Low code, we often think of that as just being something that happens in app dev, database web apps. But actually, low code is something that is impacting the whole space that Build cares about. It's happening in AI. Look at AutoML, for example. It's happening in robotic process automation. I saw Microsoft just bought a company called Softomotive in this space, right? It's happening everywhere. You're going to see this democratization, easier to use tooling, because that's the only way we can actually scale the skills that are in industry right now.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Neil. Thank you so much, Bola. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I know we could chat all day. We had an amazing chat before the session as well. I just want to thank you both for your insights and your time.
Thank you.
All right, Amy.